The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. Hopefully you had a great long weekend. I know we did, and there's plenty of sports to go around, and we will get to those topics. But first, get to our guests and my co-host. Greg Buchanan, how are you?
Not too bad, Moses.
And our special guest today, Anika Nottveit with New Cap News. I know you grace us with your presence, and you bring in a wealth of knowledge. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've been bugging you about this for weeks, maybe even months.
Well, probably, and now you get your chance to, bust your chops amongst the big boys. But we'll start off with the New York Rangers and the Montreal Canadiens. Now, after Game 1, the second period, the biggest issue was Carey Price. Now, minus Michel Therrien's diatribe, or at least yesterday's pregame, it seemed like the Canadiens were deflated. It didn't show necessarily in the first period, but if it wasn't for Henrik Lundqvist, it would have been a whole different story. New York Rangers also taking Game 2, even though they were outshot and, for most part, outplayed by the Montreal Canadiens. How big is a goaltender, guys, especially losing out Carey Price? Is this going to be the series at all for Montreal?
Well, I definitely think they lost a whole bunch of momentum. I mean, you hear the coach say all the time that he is their best player. You take the best player out of the team, where does it leave them?
I don't want to compare them to Buffalo, but Buffalo a few years ago, and they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. What do you remember about that team? What got them to that Stanley Cup final? The one goalie, Dominic Hasek. The rest of the team.
You mean you forgot about Matthew Barnaby? Come on, one of their leading goal scorers during the playoffs?
But Carey Price means so much to that team. And you take him out of the lineup, and it's just not a position player. He's their best player, like you said. Mm-hmm. And he's your best penalty killer. He's everything to you. And then as a team, that just takes a whole lot out of you. When you hit the ice in Game 2, you're like, we don't have that guy. And you're almost, that's an excuse for tonight. And that's going to be an excuse in the series.
Does Montreal have any prayer to send this back to the Bell Center for Game 5, or even perhaps extend it to a 7th game in this series?
Yeah,
no.
I don't think so.
You think it's going to be a sweep? You don't think they have enough? Do you guys agree?
I think they have enough jam in them that they're going to win one game in New York. Are they going to win more than that? Is it going to go more than 5? I have my doubts. You're going to put a kid in net at MSG in a playoff game, just a second playoff game, who's only played his second game in a month. That's a lot to ask.
Do you think he has good experience in other championship games, though?
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything
he does
right
have
now.
a resume,
No.
but the pedigree is always different, right?
Yeah,
You're going from a Memorial
yeah.
Cup in which he's won to the NHL, the AHL, et cetera, right?
And you can say whatever you want to say. He did this at the junior level. He's on this at the American Hockey League level. But he's also been off for a month. He's been off for an entire month. And they can say, well, he's practiced. Practice and game means nothing together.
Completely different pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll talk about pressure. We want to move on to the New York Rangers. How about this? Earlier in their series in the Eastern Conference semifinal with the Pittsburgh Penguins, they weren't necessarily complaining, but you could see the frustration, especially with their head coach, saying, we are playing 5 games in 7 days. That's a lot of games to play, especially in a short playoff format. Down 3-1 in their series. We talked about this even last week, Greg, about Marty St. Louis and how a team that is galvanized ends up playing great hockey. That's which it happened. Pittsburgh ended up losing 3 straight after being up 3-1, losing out that series, which means wholesale changes, I should say. You lose Ray Shero, possibly Dan Bilesma, but he still kept his job. Guys, do you agree with that, or they should have just cleaned house altogether?
Well, in my opinion, like the GM owns the team, and he picks all the players. They had a great team, but they didn't perform. So where does that fall? Like, who does that fall on? That would be on the coach, right? Because they had such high expectations. They had all the pieces there for a great team.
It does and it doesn't. General manager is responsible for the coach. General manager is responsible for the players. And 9 times out of 10, the general manager should be the fall guy. And in this case, what they're doing is they're getting rid of the general manager, hiring a new one, let the new guy decide whether the head coach will still be on the bench. So I kind of like the way that Pittsburgh's doing it. Will Dan be out of a job? Yeah, likely so.
So you say Dan Bilesma is going to be gone.
Oh, yeah.
Anika?
Well, I don't know. if that new GM wants to can him, then there's that.
But will he? Do you agree? Do you think you see him back under or behind that bench?
Not the way that
No?
not the way that they did in the playoffs. Yeah.
Well, you got high expectations.
Mm-hmm.
It's always Stanley Cup or bust. What about Ray Shero? Is he going to be out of a job quickly?
No, he'll find something. Great pedigree. His dad was a Hall of Fame coach with Philadelphia and the Rangers, so he'll find a place to land. And guys like him may not get a GM job, but he'll get a job in hockey somewhere.
Well, speaking of a guy who's looking out for a job now, it's Ryan Miller. The St. Louis Blues inked Brian Elliott to a 3-year deal. It'll be him and Jake Allen fighting for the #1 position for that crease. However, Ryan Miller, expendable. He's a UFA. Where does he go?
Oh, this is for an interesting one. How about Pittsburgh?
Really?
Here's Pittsburgh. They want to do something to shake things up. They already fired the GM, like we said. Likely the coach is going to be the next guy to go. They always kind of point the finger at Fleury. I don't think he's the main reason why they're not winning, but you put Miller in that position, and he signs a short-term contract. If he wins a cup in Pittsburgh, he can write his ticket anywhere. So Pittsburgh might be a good fit, but likely he's going to end up in Anaheim or San Jose because his wife's an actress, and he'll be one close to her.
Yeah, he'll want to be close to home for sure. So I guess we can kind of write off Canadian teams. Maybe the Canadians could sign him up really quick for the rest of the series.
I wish that could be the case. Well,
Yeah.
Montreal would definitely like that, especially their fans. But you don't see him going to, say, I don't know, a Vancouver, going somewhere, or is he going to go to a Stanley Cup contender?
He's going to go to a Stanley Cup contender. I think he's a guy that he has enough pedigree in his contract and his status that he doesn't want to go just to a place to go and get a big fat contract. He wants to go to a place where he's going to win. And with his wife on anger management, I think probably California is going to be a good fit for him. But don't be surprised Pittsburgh comes into the equation, or even Minnesota. Brizzy, he looked good in the playoffs, but come on, long term with Brizzy? No, I don't think so.
So Miller in Minnesota might look good. I'm actually more shocked that you know what show Ryan Miller's wife is on.
Yeah.
Wikipedia is your friend.
Oh, okay. Well, blame Wikipedia. You're not just the anger management fan. All right. Well, speaking of anger or management, when we return, we'll talk about Milan Lucic and his, threats, shall we say, towards a couple members of the Montreal Canadiens coming up.